Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the Case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Thanks for joining us at Cold Case Christianity. This week we're going to talk about why it's so important to pick the right jury before you make a case for anything, including the case for Christianity. So if you're interested in making the case for what you believe, or just interested in sharing the gospel, it's really important to develop this skill set. As a matter of fact, people will often ask me, what has made you successful in prosecuting criminal cases? Now, we've done a bunch of these over the years, and I've had a great team to work with, great fellow investigators that I've worked with, and certainly great prosecutor that I've worked with over the years. So in some ways, it's not all about any one of us, it's how we operate together as a team. But when you look at how and why we've been successful over the years, cases aren't usually won, in my experience anyway, at opening statements. They're not won really during the presentation of evidence for the course of the trial. They're not really won at closing argument. Sadly, and interestingly, cases are usually won at jury selection. Picking the right 12 people to sit in that box is incredibly important. As a matter of fact, both sides, both prosecutors and defense attorneys, have come to specialize in this skill. We all look at it for the same reason. We all examine these details for the same reason. We want jurors that are open-minded, that are going to be able to accept what we tell them, that aren't going to resist us for one reason or another. As a matter of fact, I've discovered there are three important attributes of jurors that I look for before I impanel anyone to sit on one of our cases. Not that I get to do that, the prosecutors do that, but I certainly am involved sometimes helping the prosecutors vet which jurors we're going to use on our trial. And so a lot of us get involved in that process. And I can tell you, I'm personally looking for three things. It turns out these three things are also the three things that make people really good jurors when it comes to the Christian case. So I also look for these three things when I'm trying to decide who it is I should share my faith with. So I think that jury selection has got an application beyond criminal trials. It actually will help you become more effective in sharing what you believe if you learn how to carefully select a jury. So I want to talk today about those three attributes and why I think these three attributes are so essential, and why we ought to take the time to become specialized in our jury selection. You realize that attorneys on both sides actually hire specialists often to help them with this process, because they know, I don't care how good your case is, if you've got 12 people who aren't willing to hear it, aren't ready to hear it, aren't open-minded enough to hear it, forget it. You're not going to be able to win your case. The same thing I think is true when you talk about share your Christian worldview. Now, let me just say one thing to you before I start giving you the list of three. I'm not going to give you this list to say, well, gosh, if you don't have these three things in somebody you're talking to, just don't share the gospel. I would never say that. In fact, when I wasn't these three things and I was a non-believer and I was an atheist, I had friends who repeatedly tried to share the truth with me, even though I didn't possess these three things that I typically look for in any juror. But interestingly, once I became interested, once I started to develop these three characteristics, my memory served me well. And I remembered then all the things that had been said to me over the years, all the truths that had been shared with me over the years, all of those things came back to mind. So I don't think their efforts were ever wasted in sharing what they did for the years they shared it with me, even though I didn't possess these three characteristics. But I will tell you this, if you understand what these three characteristics are, and you've got choices about who you can share and how you can share and when you can share, it will help you to make the right choice. Also, it'll help you to understand why sometimes you don't seem to be all that effective. And it'll help you to kind of have a reasonable expectation, given that you're going to share, but the person you're sharing with may not have these three characteristics right now, and therefore I've got reasonable expectations about how well I might do. So I'm going to offer these to you not in an effort to say, hey, if you don't see these, don't say anything. No, I'm offering these to you so that if you see these, you'll say, wow, this is the time. Or if you don't see these things and you're still sharing anyway, you'll have reasonable expectations. So let's hop right into it. The first thing I'm looking for when it comes to a jury selection is I want passionate jurors. Here's what I mean by that. I simply want jurors who are interested. Apathy is a killer. It's a killer in everything. You know, if you've got an apathetic juror who just feels like he just hates to be there, and you'll see this sometimes. People will come into the jury room and we're selecting a jury, and they've got one excuse after another why they don't want to be there. Sometimes it's not just apathy, it's really, I don't want to get involved. And so you got to really kind of fight through that. Do I really want somebody on my jury who, if I can't energize them, and sometimes judges will do this, they'll do their best to inject some life into dispassionate jurors by reminding them of how important and valuable their civic duty is as a juror. And that oftentimes does work. Jurors kind of get it. They say, okay, I'm having a bad attitude about this, and maybe I need to rethink why I'm so dispassionate about this. And so I think jurors sometimes can be energized. A judge can do a good job of making it clear why it's so important for them to get involved in this. So that does happen, and you may have to do the same thing with some of the people in your life who appear to be dispassionate. I had a friend one time who would tell me, look, Jim, you're just wasting your time with me. I don't care. I mean, and I'm not against you, and I'm not for you. I just don't care about this. You're wasting your breath. Well, this is somebody who's displaying the quintessential apathetic characteristic. They're not passionate about the case. I want somebody who really wants to know. They're interested. Sometimes in Christendom, we will call these folks seekers, right? Because they are truly not only willing to listen, they're interested, they're leaning in, they want to know. Look, you don't always have people like that in your life. We can find 12 people like that to put on a jury, but you may not be able to say to yourself, well, gosh, I'm not even sure I have 12 people like that in my world right now who I can share the gospel with. But there may be somebody who you know is at a point in their life, in a crisis point in their life, or maybe God has brought them to a point where they're for whatever reason, they are now interested. They're not apathetic. They actually want to know more. Well, I think that's the first thing you're looking for. And those are the folks that you would really be kicking yourself if you didn't spend time with them. You know, if you're in a plane and there's somebody who's really kind of trying to keep to themselves, okay, they're trying to keep to themselves. They don't want to be disturbed. But if there's somebody who seems to be asking questions or seems to be interested, boy, you'd feel bad if you didn't take time to share with them, wouldn't you? Because you know that they've got that first ingredient you're looking for, which is passion. Now, I'm going to read you a quote that I've often talked about in both my books. I've written about this quote because it was so formative for me as a Christian. This is from C.S. Lewis, who in God in the Dock said this: Christianity is a statement which, if false, is of no importance. And if true, is of infinite importance. Lewis says, the one thing it cannot be is moderately important. Wow. When I really thought about the kind of metaphysical claims that Christianity proposes, I agreed. This really is a matter of either no importance or infinite importance, but I can't be kind of wishy-washy about it. I can't be apathetic about it. I've got to see it as just false and therefore don't care, or if true, it should be the kind of truth that animates me to get off my backside and do something. And that's what I think we have here with the Christian claims. Sometimes it's just a matter of us making the kinds of claims we're talking about important to the people with whom we're talking. They've got to understand that these claims are important to begin with. And it may just mean that we have to spend some extra time helping our friends to see why they should be passionate about this case before we even make the case. First thing I'm looking for in a juror is passion. If I don't have it, I'm tempted to let him excuse himself or let his excuse resonate with the judge, or I might just exclude him. I want somebody who first and foremost is interested. Let that think about it for a second. Think about that for a minute as we kind of move forward to the other two, and we'll get to those right after the break.
Need a speaker for your next conference, retreat, training seminar, or church service? Jim travels around the country, making the case for the existence of God, the deity of Jesus, and the reliability of the Bible. He'd love to partner with you to create a powerful, transformational training experience. Just visit the Cold Case Christianity website and click the Book Me tab. You'll find everything you need to know there, including a list of Jim's speaking topics, promotional materials, Jim's speaking calendar, and a link to connect with our team so we can book your event.
Okay, the second thing I'm looking for when it comes to picking a jury is, after passion, is this might seem like ridiculous and so obvious, right? But I'm looking for open-minded jurors. Open-minded jurors. Now, I know that that probably sounds like the kind of thing you hear in a jury selection, right? So what do duh. But the truth is that we're all human, right? We all have some experience that either inclines us towards a certain set of beliefs or inclines us away from a certain set of beliefs. I'm not looking for folks that are unbiased in the sense that I recognize that all jurors, all humans you might put on a jury, possess some kind of a bias, in the sense that we all have experiences that kind of change the way we feel. Look, maybe you've had a bad experience with law enforcement, so you're not inclined to look at what law enforcement represents in a favorable way. Maybe you've got family, on the other hand, who are law enforcement, so you're more inclined to look at law enforcement in a favorable way. We're really saying, look, regardless of where you might have come from, and we recognize that you might have even had a bad experience or a good experience that might color the way you see things. Okay. Are you able to kind of take that experience you've had, that background you've had, that inclination you have toward for or against somebody or something, and put that on the shelf, recognizing that here you have to look at this thing fairly, maybe even kind of guard against you're the kind of person who leans this way, so you know that in this deliberation you're going to have to kind of right yourself toward the center a little bit. Okay. I think a lot of people recognize that, yeah, I am inclined to kind of treat this side with favor or this side with favor, so I've got to be fair. We actually will say it that way. Can you be fair in spite of the fact you may have had an experience? Look, my son was impaneled on a jury years ago, and it was a misdemeanor, I think it was a misdemeanor case. No, it may have been a felony case, but in any regard, he was a son of a police officer at the time. He was not yet a police officer himself. But if they're going to ask him, hey, do you have anybody in your family that's involved in law enforcement? He would said, yeah, my dad. Okay. He was a young guy. He was maybe 20 or 21 years old. He said, well, anybody else? He said, well, yeah, my grandfather's a police officer too. Oh my gosh, two people now, two formative people in his life. Now, of course, you have to ask, well, what's your relationship like with your dad and your grand? If you hate your dad and you hate your grandfather, you're not quite sure where. Just the fact that you have family that are police officers doesn't mean you're inclined for or against, right? Necessarily. Then the next question he asked, well, is there anybody else in your family that maybe are involved in law enforcement one way or another? He said, well, yeah, probably like one of our best family friends. My dad's best friend is a prosecutor. So now you've got, oh my gosh, here's a kid who and I think they did ask him the questions about whether he had a good relationship or not. And so now you've got a kid who is really, what you would think at least, pro-prosecution, right? I mean, he's got a dad and a grandfather who are both police officers, and he's got a close family friend who's also a police officer. Wow. I mean, isn't that just so much bias you can't even overcome that? Why in the world would the defense attorney allow a kid, when you've got exemptions, you can take somebody off the jury if you don't think they're appropriate. Every side's got so many they can knock out, right? Why would you allow someone like that on your jury? Well, because in the end, when he asked the questions of all the different jurors they looked at for this particular case, that question about, look, in spite of who you are or where you've been or what your background has been or what your experience has been, can you be fair? He believed that my son could. And this is often the case where we've got somebody who they'll tell us, yeah, you're doing this case and it involves a grand theft, and my dad was arrested for a grand theft. Oh, really? Oh, boy. So did you feel like he was arrested fairly? No, he wasn't. I don't think he was guilty. I think he was innocent. Oh, wow. Do I want someone like that on my jury? We often will put someone like that on the jury, because the question is, even though you had that experience where somebody you felt was falsely convicted for a grand theft, and now you're going to actually be hearing a grand theft, the question is, can you or are you able to be fair in this setting?